The story came full circle. What began as an insult in a single seat became a global conversation. A woman's arrogance collided with a man's quiet authority, and the result shook not only an airline, but an entire audience watching online. To this day, the viral moment is remembered not just as a scandal, but as a story of resilience, dignity, and the power of identity revealed. If you're watching this, ask yourself, how many times have we looked at someone and judged them without knowing their story? How many powerful voices have been silenced or dismissed simply because of bias? Marcus's story reminds us that respect must never be conditional. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Share it. Comment below. Subscribe for more untold stories of injustice, resilience, and triumph. Together, we can make sure that when dignity is denied, no one looks away. In a later interview, Marcus reflected on the incident. He spoke not with anger, but with clarity. This was never just about a seat, he said. It was about respect. Too often, people judge worth by what they assume, not by who someone truly is. Dignity isn't a privilege, it's a right. His words resonated worldwide. Messages of support poured in from entrepreneurs, travelers, and everyday people who had faced similar indignities. Marcus turned the incident into a platform for change, urging airlines and corporations alike to address bias head-on. For many, the lesson was clear. Power isn't just in titles or wealth. Real power is in demanding respect, calmly, firmly, without losing dignity. Because this wasn't just Marcus's fight. It was a reminder to everyone: never underestimate the quiet strength of those you choose to dismiss.
Within hours, the story hit social media. Videos went viral under hashtags like "seat scandal" and "respect in first class." News outlets ran headlines: "Passenger denies CEO his seat, backlash erupts." Business networks picked it up, framing it as a lesson in bias and arrogance. The airlines scrambled to respond. Executives issued apologies, policies were reviewed, investors demanded answers about how such public humiliation could happen to one of the world's most prominent Black CEOs. The woman, once smug and untouchable, became a symbol, not just of entitlement, but of what happens when bias collides with accountability. But for Marcus, it wasn't about revenge. It was about something larger. Because the true power of that moment wasn't the punishment, it was the message that echoed beyond the flight. The cabin returned to an uneasy silence as Marcus pressed send. Within minutes, a ripple effect began. 2 rows back, a passenger's phone buzzed. He glanced down, eyes widening. Then another ping, and another. Marcus wasn't just any passenger. He was the keynote speaker at an industry summit that half the first-class cabin was attending. His name, his reputation, carried weight. And the email he'd just sent wasn't to customer service. It was to the board of directors. The message was simple. This is how your staff treats your most loyal passengers. Decide what your values are worth. The woman still sat smugly in 1A when the lead attendant received a frantic call from corporate. Her posture stiffened. She whispered to her colleague, then approached Marcus with sudden deference. "Mr. Hill, we sincerely apologize. Please allow us to make this right immediately." The woman's smirk vanished. "Wait, what?" she blurted. Passengers leaned in, hungry for the reveal. The attendant's next words silenced the cabin. "This is Marcus Hill, CEO of Orion Technologies." A collective gasp. Whispers spread like wildfire. Phones lit up. Tweets flew. "Woman refuses to give up seat to a CEO?" The woman's face drained of color.
Her earlier arrogance crumbled into nervous fidgeting. She stammered, I didn't know. But it was too late. The court of public opinion had already rendered its verdict. By the time his identity was revealed, her arrogance was shattered, and the airline's reputation was on trial for all to see. The attendant tried again. "Ma'am, his ticket clearly states seat 1A. Please move to your assigned seat." But the woman crossed her arms, refusing. "I paid good money for this. He can sit somewhere else." Gasps echoed again. The passengers around them shifted, sensing the tension thickening like storm clouds. Some pulled out phones, discreetly recording. Marcus inhaled deeply, his composure unshaken. He could have raised his voice. He could have demanded immediate removal. But instead, he reached into his leather briefcase and pulled out something unexpected: a sleek tablet. He typed swiftly, sending an email with a subject line that would soon ripple across the airline's executive offices. Unaware, the woman leaned back smugly, whispering to a neighbor, "People always try to sneak into first class." But her arrogance was seconds away from crumbling, because just when it seemed Marcus had no power in that moment, a single email would change everything.
The man remained silent for a moment, steadying himself. Years of facing microaggressions had trained him to pick his battles carefully. His name was Marcus Hill, CEO of a multinational tech company valued at billions. Raised in a modest neighborhood, Marcus had built his empire through grit, intelligence, and resilience. He had walked into boardrooms where no one looked like him and left as the leader everyone respected. Airports had always been a reminder of how perception trailed him. Despite his tailored suits, his platinum cards, and his name on Forbes lists, too often strangers questioned if he belonged. But Marcus never forgot where he came from. Every slight fueled his drive, not only to succeed, but to change the rules of the game. And now, as he stood in first class, his ticket in hand, his dignity on trial, the strength he had built over a lifetime was about to turn this confrontation into something unforgettable. Because in this very moment, the arrogance of one woman would meet the quiet power of a man who had nothing left to prove, yet everything to reveal.
The airplane cabin hummed with the usual pre-flight chatter. Passengers stuffed bags into overhead bins, attendants prepared safety checks. But in row 1A, first class, a confrontation simmered. A sharply dressed black man approached his assigned seat, only to find it already occupied by a woman scrolling casually on her phone. When he politely pointed out that it was his seat, she didn't move. Instead, she gave him a dismissive look and said, loud enough for others to hear, "Are you sure you're in the right section?" A hush fell across the nearby rows. The implication cut deeper than words. She leaned back as if guarding the seat, convinced he didn't belong. The businessman stood silently, his ticket in hand, his dignity on trial before strangers' eyes. Gasps spread. Some passengers exchanged knowing looks. Others buried themselves in newspapers to avoid the discomfort. No one expected what would happen next. Not the woman, not the passengers, not even the flight crew. Because the man she had just humiliated wasn't only a passenger, he was someone whose identity would shake the entire plane.
The flight was headed to New York, filled with executives, lawyers, and consultants. Deals worth millions were about to be discussed on the ground. Everyone in first class represented power, wealth, and reputation. For the woman guarding the seat, her tone wasn't just casual rudeness, it was layered with entitlement. First class isn't for everyone, she quipped to the attendant who tried to intervene, smirking at the murmurs around her. The businessman, calm yet firm, stood his ground. His boarding pass clearly read 1A, but still the disbelief lingered in her expression, as if the paper in his hand wasn't proof enough. To her, he was an inconvenience. To him, it was more than a seat. It was respect. And respect wasn't optional. Passengers leaned forward, sensing that something bigger was brewing. A man in 2B whispered, "This is about to get ugly." He wasn't wrong, because this was only the beginning, the moment before the storm that would rock the entire cabin.
The airplane cabin hummed with the usual pre-flight chatter. Passengers stuffed bags into overhead bins, attendants prepared safety checks. But in row 1A, first class, a confrontation simmered. A sharply dressed black man approached his assigned seat, only to find it already occupied by a woman scrolling casually on her phone. When he politely pointed out that it was his seat, she didn't move. Instead, she gave him a dismissive look and said, loud enough for others to hear, "Are you sure you're in the right section?" A hush fell across the nearby rows. The implication cut deeper than words. She leaned back as if guarding the seat, convinced he didn't belong. The businessman stood silently, his ticket in hand, his dignity on trial before strangers' eyes. Gasps spread. Some passengers exchanged knowing looks. Others buried themselves in newspapers to avoid the discomfort. No one expected what would happen next. Not the woman, not the passengers, not even the flight crew. Because the man she had just humiliated wasn't only a passenger, he was someone whose identity would shake the entire plane.